Today, I'm here to talk about a dreadful subject, one that leaves thousands lost and abandoned every day. It leads to children without parents, wives without husbands, mothers without daughters, and friends without best friends. That topic is suicide. I could stand here and give you dozens of reasons as to why I'm speaking about suicide today. I could show you the graphs of climbing suicide rates, telling you that it's the second leading cause of death for youth ages 10 to 24. I could show you the photos and tell you the stories of Towson University students who have taken their own lives within the past year. I could try as hard as I possibly can to show you how big of an issue suicide is, but I'm not going to. Because I know some of you have stayed up with a friend in the middle of the night, begging them to keep on living. Because I know some of you have woken up in the morning and wished that you hadn't. Because I know some of you have gotten that call and heard that your loved one has taken their own life and have been forced to go on without them. That's why I'm not going to tell you why suicide is something we can't just sit back and let happen, because you already know. So now what? People are killing themselves every day, one every 40 seconds. What do we do about it? What do we, Towson students, faculty, and community members do to stop this tragic loss of life? The idea that I'm proposing to you today is Towson University's own Suicide Prevention Task Force. It would operate closely with the Counseling Center and consist of faculty, counselors, and students, all dedicated to preventing suicide at our school. The task force would work to address problems specific to our school by performing in-depth research in order to find out our school's main problems, then implementing programs and resources to help alleviate these issues. I've prepared some examples of these resources, some currently in place and some not, that the task force could promote, modify, or implement. I separated them into 3 categories: prevention, struggle, and coping. Essentially, the before, the during, and the after. In order to prevent suicide at TU, we need to make sure that our leaders, both students and faculty, are receiving ample training in suicide prevention. The task force would evaluate and modify, if necessary, the programs that are already in place and develop new programs for those who don't currently have access to training. Some students, however, do not confide in these student leaders or faculty. They confide in their friends. Therefore, it's important that all students know what to do when a friend is suicidal. For new students, this would look like an information session at orientation, something that our university does not currently provide. For students who would like more thorough training, the task force could develop regularly offered crisis training classes. Towson University has held something similar to this, the Student Support Network. However, it's a 7-week program and is not currently offered this semester. Because of the time commitment and lack of regularity, some students are dissuaded from partaking in the program. Regularly offering a single-day crisis training class would allow students to get the information they need without sacrificing a large amount of their time. One crucial step that would be covered in these meetings is referring struggling students to a professional. We have an amazing team at the Counseling Center working hard to ensure that our students remain mentally healthy. Unfortunately, students who need help the most are often least likely to use these services. In order to encourage students to get the help they need, we could implement on our campus an interactive screening program developed by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. If implemented here, the program would be customized specifically for our needs as a university. The screening program will begin first with a confidential 10-minute stress and depression questionnaire. Afterwards, the student would receive a personal written response from a professional in the Counseling Center, offering options for follow-up evaluation and treatment. The students, if they choose, could talk online with the campus counselor while maintaining their anonymity, schedule a meeting, or request a referral for treatment or support services. Because the process is online and allows the user to remain completely anonymous, students would be more willing to use the program and subsequently look into treatment. Some people, however, are reluctant or unwilling to get treatment, go to therapy, or even talk about their issues because of the stigma around mental illness. Our society has conditioned many to view mental illness as something to be ashamed of, something to avoid, and something to never be discussed. Our university needs to show that having a mental illness doesn't make you weak. In fact, it's quite the opposite. In order to demonstrate these ideas, the task force would develop campaigns that would aim to reduce the stigma behind mental illness, demonstrate that seeking help is a courageous thing to do, and that having a mental illness and seeking help are nothing to be ashamed of. In addition to precautionary actions, it is also important to consider resources for those who are currently struggling or have recently made an attempt. When someone makes a suicide attempt, it's important to have plans set in place ahead of time so that no one is forced to make important decisions in the middle of a crisis. While all situations would be handled on a case-by-case basis, this plan would consider various aspects to help the student, including full or partial medical withdrawal from classes, local treatment options, and both on and off-campus resources. Many students, however, may be reluctant to get treatment for fear that they will not be able to keep up with their coursework. For some, it is necessary to withdraw from classwork in order to focus solely on recovery. However, others experiencing less severe symptoms may be able to receive treatment while continuing their coursework. For these students, the task force could work with Shepherd Pratt to develop a program that allows students to both receive treatment and continue their coursework, either remotely or on campus. Because of all the various facets of suicide prevention, the task force could advocate for hiring a specific staff member who can help handle all the aspects and work with various departments on campus. For example, some students who have made a suicide attempt run into problems with the school involving drugs, alcohol, or weapons, and are subsequently required to go through student affairs in regards to the matter. This staff member would work with student affairs in these situations, acting as an advocate for the student to ensure that their mental health is considered first and foremost. The final factor to the suicide prevention task force deals with coping after a loss. While the entire goal of this program is to prevent suicide, it would be naive not to consider what to do in the event that one of our students dies by suicide. When a student takes his or her life, oftentimes schools try to hide it from the media, push it under the rug, and pretend it never happened. However, when a tragedy like this happens, it needs to be addressed. It needs to be talked about. The worst thing to do is ignore it. In the unfortunate event that a student dies by suicide, the task force would work to address it head-on by continuing the discussion about suicide and mental illness and providing resources to the grieving. One resource that is already set in place is the student bereavement procedure, a fairly new policy that allows students time to take off class to mourn their loss and attend funeral services. Since its recent implementation last year, the procedure has helped numerous students deal with their losses without stressing about missing classes and falling back on coursework. Because the procedure is still new, the task force would work to make sure that students are aware of this procedure, especially when and if a Towson student passes away. Grieving students are overwhelmed with emotion and need a strong support system. Our university currently has a grief and loss support group hosted by the Counseling Center. It serves as a supportive space for students to share their experiences and coping strategies and to meet others going through similar experiences. Because of limited resources, the group, unfortunately, is not always able to take on new members. The Suicide Prevention Task Force would work with the Counseling Center to help alleviate issues like these so that anyone who needs the support is able to receive it. While talking to others who have lost a loved one can be incredibly helpful, those who have lost someone to suicide may be having different experiences with grieving than those who have lost someone to, say, a physical illness or injury. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has a survivor outreach program, which allows survivors to meet either in person, by phone, or online with someone else who has had a similar suicide loss. The task force would work to make this resource known by including it in their campaigns and encouraging the counseling center to advertise this service. I firmly believe that by implementing a task force to help put in place or modify the various resources I've mentioned to you today will help to reduce suicide at our university and act as a catalyst for other schools to follow. Suicide sucks. There's no other way to say it. It's sad. It's unfair. It's cruel. Being left by a friend or family member and having to make sense of it all is a torture I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. But the way I see it, we have two choices when this happens. We can wallow in the sorrow and let the grief consume us, or we can do something about it. I'm choosing to do something about it. I hope you all will too.